Greetings, followers. I'm Brian.
And I'm James, and it is our privilege to introduce to you a new game to the tabletop gaming community, Grid Factions.
We have spent the past 2+ years creating what has been to us the most challenging gaming endeavor we have ever attempted. So thank you and enjoy this first introduction to Grid Factions.
Alright, for starters, this is the playing surface called the grid section. It is a 4 foot by 3 foot table marked off by 2-inch square spaces.
The cool thing about Grid Factions is you can actually link up as many of these guys together as you want, but you're going to want to stay in a box formation. Try to avoid L shapes, T shapes, plus shaped side or shaped table pieces, because if you do that, you're not going to really, our rules aren't really designed to go around empty spaces, so like corners and such. So definitely try and keep it in a box shape. Alright guys, for starters here, we're going to show you the basic elements that are needed to play a game of Grid Factions. For starters, every player, we actually call them a faction commander, they will be using a faction, and you will actually need the faction in order to play. We will have James here introduce the faction in just a sec, but if you look in the background, you also see that there are different types of scenery and other types of buildings and stuff. We'll get into that in just a second here. So let's have James talk about the factions.
Alright, so each faction is going to consist of 26 units, and those units are divided into 9 classes, so that's 9 different types of units. You're going to have your officers, your riflemen with bayonets, just called bayonets, your riflemen with grenades, called grenadiers, your flamethrowers, your light machine gunners, your rocket launchers, your mortars, and your joint terminal attack controllers called JTACs. The units are arranged into 3 tiers that represent their offensive and defensive characteristics, and included with the factions there will be unit reference cards, and on the cards the tiers will be represented by stars, either 1 star, 2 star, or 3 stars.
Okay, as James mentioned, for starters, we're going to talk about the Tier 1 units. We actually call these guys the Vanguards. For starting, we have 3 officers, 4 riflemen, and 2 riflemen with bayonets. Now, each of these guys just have single unit like attack patterns where they can only attack 1 person at a time. Now, James will get into that with some of the other tier units. A lot of the units will have different abilities to where they can target more than 1 person at a time. We call that a target pattern. Now, every unit in Grid Factions has the ability to melee on other units. The officers and the bayonets, we actually decided to give them a melee buff. So we actually give them an extra die when they're meleeing. Now, their starting initial attack die is a D6. That is what they would be rolling against another unit when attacking. All units, when doing melee, will be using a D6 die. So in this case, with the officer and the bayonets, they will be using 2 D6s against an opponent's other D6 when meleeing.
Alright, next up is your Tier 2. They're called the Enforcers. You've got 4 Grenadiers, 4 Flamethrowers, and 2 LMGs. These guys will all attack primarily with a D8, the only exception being the Grenadier. When using his rifle, he will roll a D6. When attacking with a grenade, since it's an explosive weapon, you're going to have something called a Danger Close, which we'll go over later, along with the 2 attack patterns of the flamethrower and how the spray and penetration will work on your LMG. Additionally, if these guys are killed by anything but melee, they will explode and affect every unit surrounding them, and we'll show you how that works in a little bit.
Alright, for our final tier, we actually call these guys the Guardians. We've got 3 rocket launchers, 2 mortars, and 2 JTACs. That's actually an abbreviation for Joint Terminal Attack Controller. What these guys actually are for is laser targeting and calling in missile fires and whatnot. So if you're wondering what that complicated name was, that's what that is. For the rocket launchers, well, all 3 of these guys for the Tier 3 are going to be using a D10 for attacking and defending during combat. All 3 of the units also have the Danger Close, as James mentioned before with the Grenadiers. This guy can't hurt anyone within 2 spaces, this one can't hurt anyone within 3 spaces, and these guys can't hurt anyone within 3 spaces as well. Alright, each faction, in order to start a game of Grid Factions, you will have to have what we call a home base. Now we have the setup right here of all 26 of the units surrounding the home base. The one restriction about your setup is you have to have your JTACs and your mortars in the centermost portion of the base. The rest of the units can be placed anywhere around the base. They just have to be as tucked closely as possible. Typically, you would want to leave these back two spaces open because you don't want to bury your units. We're going to talk about in a minute here how you cannot move your units through other friendly or enemy units. You have to be able to move around them when getting your guys out of the base. So this is actually why we put the mortars and the JTACs, the most powerful units we have. We buried them so it's a little more balanced. Takes a little bit more time to get them out of the base before they can be put into combat. The base itself has to be a 4x4 grid space area just like this and can have no more than partial cover on it. These partial covers are actually favoring a side of a grid space, which we'll talk about in a minute why that matters. Sometimes cover might be in the center of the space, but if it's favoring a side, that does have special significance. We'll talk about that soon. Alright, as you saw before and mentioned before, Grid Factions offers a different variety of terrain, buildings, bunkers, and cover. These are not required unless a certain game scenario specifies as such, but it is definitely recommended just to make the gameplay a lot more dynamic and challenging, more obstacles. And we're going to explain here later on that the buildings offer quite the advantage when it comes to attacking another unit. So as you can see here, what we have, different types of terrain. We have foliage pieces here, which are great because in Grid Factions, you actually have to use actual line of sight between units. So if you've got a unit here and you've got a unit here, if they can't see each other through these trees, there can't be any combat between the two. Other terrain that we got is the partial and full cover. Now the difference between the two, let me grab a unit here just to show you. Difference is that the partial covers only cover about half of the unit. Now the rules in Grid Factions are to be considered partial cover, it has to at least go up to the unit's kneecaps. And this serves an advantage too. We're going to show in a little bit for when someone's attacking you, they will then lose some range on the unit that they are targeting, especially if that unit is behind the partial cover. Now the full cover, as you can see here, is literally, as it sounds, a complete wall that hides the unit completely, almost serving the same purpose as a foliage piece where you would not be able to see the unit if you had another guy over on this side. Some of the full cover could be done where, like with this piece here with the fence, yes, the unit is hidden in the back there, but there are little slats. So if a unit who is able to disregard cover, such as the mortar and the JTAC units, can see through here and that unit they're targeting, they would still be able to attack him even though he's behind a full wall. Just some little samples that you can do with different types of full cover. Okay, as I mentioned before, there are certain game scenarios that would require to have certain types of terrain or scenery on the grid. This is an example of one of those. One of our scenarios we call control points, where the objective is to actually capture the point with at least 4 of your units, and you have to hold it through at least 4 consecutive turns in order to win the game. Now, this is just an example of a control point as a radar dish. You could use like fuel depots, supply depots, but as you can see, the baseboard down here has the grid spaces on it. I have 4 units on here to show an example. Now, they don't have to capture the 4 corners. I mean, you could easily have any arrangement whatsoever, as long as you are on the baseboard, at least 4 of the grid spaces, in order to capture that point to declare a victory. Okay, and one of the last things that I want to talk about with the terrain options of Grid Factions is the buildings. Now, buildings are very essential, especially when you're trying to look for cover from units like the mortar and the JTAC that execute a shower attack pattern from the top, like from the sky. These guys are nice too because they have the floors, obviously the different elevations, but ceilings underneath. And when you're hiding a unit underneath those, that is a good way to not take any damage from those units that execute shower. Now, one awesome thing about the buildings too is with the window openings, these also have barricades. Now, you don't have to have barricades on all of your windows, but these are what would serve as a partial cover when a unit is in the building. Again, as you can see with this unit, that barricade has to be at least half the height or up to the unit's kneecaps in order to be considered a partial cover. Now, if we come over here, You can see the inside of a building and see a good idea of what the infrastructure of the building needs to look like. You've got your floors that are also clearly marked with grid spaces. The space between these two floors is about 4 inches, which is pretty tall. It basically gives you enough room to get the tallest figure, which is the bayonet, in there with room to reach around and move your figurines. You also can see that to get to each floor you have a ladder. Now the ladder would actually, we'll explain this with movement, how movement works with the movement die later on, but the ladder would count as a separate grid space when you're moving up. So if you're moving up 4 spaces, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're up. You are allowed to jump over the corners like this. As I said, the units that are hiding underneath, they get cover from any other unit that executes shower damage. Now the reason why you'd want to go up higher is, we'll talk about this in a little bit, also that every unit has a specific range when attacking, and for every level that you go up onto the building, you gain 1 extra grid space of range for every level you are up above the attacked unit. Something that we like to add to the buildings is, if you want to bridge 2 buildings together, adding the bridges is a great way to also connect the buildings, so you can avoid having to go back down the ladder and back up another ladder. You can just cut across and whatnot. Now this bridge in particular does not count as partial cover. There's no way I would consider these sides cover from any gunfire, but you could make bridges that do actually have partial or full, or even an enclosed bridge, as long as you can reach into it somehow to help protect any units that you have coming across to link buildings together.
Alright, so this is going to be talking about the movement here. We have our special movement die. It's a D6, but it's numbered 7 to 12 instead of 1 through 6. And this is what you roll when you're ready to do your movement turn. You'll be able to move up to 5 of your units. You cannot go through your own units, but you can go diagonally in between them, just like you can go diagonally around cover, and you can cut cover like this as well. And just be sure to count each ladder as a grid space when moving. So we're going to do an example here. Alright, I rolled a 10. Well, let's say this way is blocked off. I want to come around here, so I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and that'll just get me up into the building. Now let's say for that example I had only rolled a 9 and I can only get to the ladder space. It is okay if you want to prop your unit up against it, signifying that he is occupying the space on the ladder. He will not get any range bonuses until he's up on the next elevation, but that is just one way to save space for your next movement turn. Alright, so now we're going to discuss the ranges of each unit. It does not matter which direction they're facing, your range will extend in a 360-degree radius around your unit. So for right now, we've got the Tier 1. This is your officer with a pistol. He's got a range of 4, and he will attack 1 grid space at a time. Same goes for the other 2 units of this tier. You've got your rifleman with a rifle with a range of 5, and your rifleman with a bayonet, still a range of 5. Alright, so next up is your Tier 2. You're going to have your grenadier here. When he's attacking with his grenade, he's got a range of 3, and his danger close is going to be 1 grid space, so anybody immediately next to him will not be able to be targeted by a grenade, and that grenade will hit a 2x2 area for your target pattern. When you're attacking with his rifle, you will also have a range of 5 like all the other rifles, and that will be a 1x1 grid space or a single target pattern. For your flamethrower, you've got 2 different options for target patterns. You have a fan, which is a 1x4, and that's going to be able to go out up to 2 spaces away from you, but it has to remain perpendicular to your unit. You can't fire it like diagonally or anything like that. Just keep it perpendicular and within 2 grid spaces. In addition to that, he also has the option to do a concentrated blast that will go out to 3 spaces, and that will hit a 2x2 area just like the grenade. The cool thing about that is that it's going to be able to actually burn up to 1 additional level if you're firing it at a building. So if you got units inside a building you want to clear out, you'll be able to hit the ground floor and 1 floor above that with your concentrated blast, not the fan. Then we've got the LMG. He's going to have a range of 6, and he actually shoots a spray pattern, so he'll be hitting wherever you're targeting. It's going to be a 1x2 target pattern, and he will have the ability to penetrate units, and we'll go over that in just a sec. Alright, and last but certainly not least, you've got your tier 3 units. You got your RPG here, range of 6. He's going to hit a 2x2 area with his rocket, and he's going to have a danger close of 2 grid spaces. So anybody within 2 grid spaces cannot be attacked by his rockets. Then you've got your mortar, who's going to have a range of 8 and a danger close of 3. And his target pattern is going to be a 3x3 grid space area. The cool thing about him, though, is that he can actually share line of sight. So if he himself cannot see the target, but you have an ally in position with line of sight, you can share that vision and make your attack that way. Then you've got your JTAC. He cannot share line of sight because he calls in a laser targeted missile and he needs to see the target for himself. But he also has a range of 8. He also hits that 3x3 grid space target pattern, and he's also got a danger close of 3 grid spaces. Alright, so here we're going to show you some attack examples using the different types of cover in the game of grid factions. Here we've got a rifleman lined up to attack this officer. Now normally the rifleman is 4 spaces away from the officer, so he'd be well within range, but the rifleman is behind cover, so he's going to lose 1 range of attack on the officer, which will stop his range right here, and he will not be able to retaliate. So we're going to roll this out here. Alright, see, now normally, as a tier 1 unit, you need to win your roll by 1 in order to achieve a kill. So the officer would have killed the rifleman in this scenario had this cover not been here. Alright, so right now I've got my grenadier set up for an attack here, but the problem is I can't see through this wall, so I can't make an attack on my officer. So during my movement phase, I'm going to roll this rifleman right up here, who's going to gain line of sight on this officer. And instead of attacking with the rifleman and going d6 against d6 and risking the retaliation of the officer and dying, I'm going to go ahead and use this shared line of sight and lob a grenade over the wall at the officer, and he won't be able to retaliate on me. Okay, so that didn't work out too well, but as a tier 2 unit, I would need to win the roll by 2. So grenadiers have 2 grenades per turn, so I'm going to try that one more time. See if I can't seal the deal, and it looks like this guy is completely worthless. But that's how shared line of sight would work. Alright, so here we've got the Red Army, and the officer here is leading a charge of units. And unfortunately, the JTAC ran out of steam and got stuck up on this ladder. So he's just got some units built up in this building right here, and I'm going to roll in my flamethrower and try to clean some of these guys out. I'm going to use my concentrated blast and hit this 2x2 area back here. And he does have the ability to burn up an additional level, so I'm going to catch the LMG in that line of fire as well. However, it's going to stop right there. It's only going to burn up 1 level, so the officer will remain safe for this attack. So I'm going to roll my d8 for my flamethrower, and that's no good, but we're going to go ahead and roll for defense on the JTAC anyways. He would not retaliate because I'm well within his danger close. And then we've got the rifleman over here. Luckily, he didn't kill me. And then we've got the LMG on the floor right here. And it looks like he just smoked me. So in this situation, I would now explode, but there's no units for me to affect with that. And so combat would end right there. Alright, so here we have fabricated a scenario where my LMG has gone up against these 4 units. What I did was I used my 1x2 spray pattern and I targeted the JTAC and the flamethrower. I'll explain the dice in a second, but I just want to show you that the bullets will go in a straight line, and you can only penetrate the unit directly behind your forward target. So here I have killed the JTAC by outrolling him by more than 2, so he would in fact die, and my bullets would penetrate into the officer. Now, I did not beat the officer by 2, so he's still standing. And we go over here to the flamethrower. I did also beat him by more than 2, so he's dead, but I cannot penetrate to the rifleman. He's within range, but he was not close enough behind the flamethrower to receive any penetration damage. So now, my flamethrower has died, and so he needs to roll for his explosion, and okay, he rolled an 8. So everybody within 1 square in a 3x3 area around him would roll for survival. In this case, the highest the officer can roll is a 6. That will lose by 2 to the flamethrower, which will be a victory roll, so the officer will die as well. Alright, so for this example, we're going to have Brian's nicely organized little army here, And I've decided to bring my mortar up to make an attack, but I cannot see through this wall myself, so I'm gonna just march my flamethrower over here and gain some line of sight. And now I'm gonna be targeting this 3x3 area with my mortar strike, and I will be effectively hitting all of Brian's units and my own flamethrower as well.
Gosh, I at first thought that just having these two guys over here, you'd only be able to see them and target them, but you had to go and bring him in there with it, didn't you?
I got resourceful. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and launch this attack right here. And luckily I only rolled a 4.
Alright, well, since you targeted your own unit, I will let you fire against your own guy first.
Alright, let's
Oh, you're so lucky.
He is alive.
Alright, so I'm going to actually start right up here in the front. So my bayonet is actually going to roll a d6, being a tier 1 unit, against your 4. And he rolls a 2, so he actually survives. I am now going to roll for my rocket launcher. He is a tier 3, so he's going to roll. Ooh, he also survives. He only rolls a 5 against your 4. I'll start over here with my JTAC, who can actually see you in retaliation. So we'll roll him as a D10, and unfortunately he rolled a 7 against your 4, beating you by 3. So no matter what happens here, he dies. Now I want to make a point. Even though I got to this guy and it killed him, his initial target pattern was for everybody, so I still have to roll for everybody else to see what goes on here. So we're going to do the flamethrower here. Now I really hope he survives, because if he explodes, that's going to be bad news for these surrounding guys, although I could still take up one of his dudes. 5. Fortunate for me, I did survive. So he is not going to explode. I'm going to go for the rifleman, see if he lives. He rolls a 4. He ties his 4, so he's still alive. Officer back here, he's going to roll for that tier 1 d6. Ties a 4. He also survives. The LMG in the back is going to roll a tier 2 d8. Oh, he got one of my guys. I rolled a 1 against his 4. His mortar beat me by 3, so my LMG is going to die. Last but not least will be my rifleman tier 1. He rolls a 1 also, so he also dies. So out of that initial mortar attack, he only took out 2 of my guys, but I did retaliate and got him back. Very lucky rolls on my part.
Alright, so here we're going to show you an example of the advantages to gaining elevation in a building. I've got these 9 units that I want to target with my JTAC, his original range being 8, which would get me out to here. But since I am up 2 levels above my target pattern, my range is now all the way up to 10, 1 additional range for each level that I have gained. So I can in fact hit all 3 of these. In addition to gaining range, let's say for instance, the attack was set up just like this. Keep in mind that the actual buildings do not move during gameplay, and this is just a simulated event, so yeah, don't move your buildings. Now I'm looking at these guys right here. My danger close is 3, so that's 3 squares out. I would only be able to attack these rear 3 targets, but since I am elevated 2 levels above them, for each level I go up, not only do I gain range, I also lose danger close, so that's going to drop back 2 spaces. My danger close is now 1, and I can still hit all 3 of these targets with my 3x3 target pattern. Alright, so one thing to keep in mind about the mortars is that they do lob the mortar shell out of their weapon, and being under a ceiling would prevent them from attacking and getting the trajectory of their mortar shell to reach the destination. So you don't want to put them under anything and block them out from an attack like this. Just kind of eyeball it, go ahead and get down there, and just, if you don't think that that trajectory is going to clear, it's not a viable attack for you. So just kind of watch out for any terrain or obstructions that might prevent you from making your lob type shower attacks with these mortar units. Alright, this concludes the introduction to the very basics of grid factions. Keep in mind that we didn't cover everything that you're going to come across, so when you're playing, be sure to play fairly, be respectful, and always be sure to have a good time.
Make sure you like us on our Facebook page. Also check out our website, gridfactions.com, where you'll be able to purchase all merchandise and gear to play your game of Grid Factions.
Don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, I'm James.
And I'm Brian, and we will see you on the grid.